Welcome, everybody, to the Genesis Mindset. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the liquidity web of the Atropa ecosystem and how this technology is going to help DAI Stablecoin not only peg, but maintain the liquidity within the system. This has been one of the biggest talking points surrounding it. And I feel like a lot of people aren't understanding it, and myself also. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to really clearly show the logic of arbitrage bots with the liquidity web and how this is actually contributing. So Decentralized Me has put out some awesome videos recently, and he's really inspired me to create videos of a similar nature. So I'm going to show this very visually, very simply, because at the moment I'm trying to explain it to friends and family and I just sound like a crackpot. But now I really feel like this is going to be explained in such an extremely clear way that anyone will be able to understand it. That's at least my hope. So before we get started, first of all,
Oh, Soda!
using pDAI.
You guys sold my bags? Kings!
If you in pDAI, pump your fist.
All right. My friend told me not to be too bullish, so I can't be too bullish here. Otherwise, yeah. But anyway, all right. So just a little bit of fun before we get started. So let's get straight into it. So I really hope you guys enjoy this presentation. It took me a long time to put together, and I think it's probably one of the best ones that I've done so far. So liquidity webs, the logic of the Atropa ecosystem web and how it helps DAI stablecoin peg and maintain the liquidity within the system. Why is this actually important? So this is a very new technology. Cryptocurrency has the issue of high volatility, rug pulls, and scams. So all the issues revolving around liquidity and trust. So the biggest issue with Hex, for example, was its volatility due to its thin liquidity and the one-dimensional nature of its liquidity. So this was liquidity in the past. So I believe and have believed for a very long time since I've been looking into Atropa that this technology is going to be the revolution in cryptocurrency. You're either going to be doing cryptocurrency 2.0 DeFi, which is everything that's happened after Atropa ecosystem, or you're going to get lost and fall behind and do cryptocurrency 1.0 DeFi, which is everything that happened before the Atropa ecosystem. I think that this is such a massive revolution that anyone that follows this model is going to win. And we are already a year and a half ahead of everybody else. So with the Atropa ecosystem, the liquidity web is possibly not the best kind of a name, but in any case, it's something that I'm going to use to try and describe this. And the logic of arbitrage, this is going to alleviate some of the issues surrounding the volatility and liquidity issues of Hex. And this is very important because I believe a lot of people are looking at DAI stablecoin, looking at market cap, looking at liquidity, and thinking about this in the context of Hex and how Hex's price really dumped. And that's why they're looking at DAI stablecoin going, this is not possible, because they're thinking about it from the perspective of Hex. So what we need is a shift in perspective. So now let's look at first what liquidity is. So very simply, taking Atropa and DAI stablecoin, liquidity is very simply two tokens connected in a liquidity pool to create a market. So this also will generally have pools with the native tokens. So for example, WPLS in this case, which is wrapped Pulsechain. So then arbitrage is basically when there's price differentiation. So when the price rises in one pool, it creates price disparities between other pools. So this is where arbitrage occurs. So what actually happens is, what I'm doing here is I'm selling my Pulsechain into DAI stablecoin, and this creates an arbitrage where the DAI stablecoin becomes differentiated in price with the Atropa. So then the arbitrage bots will also take the opportunity between the different pools. So then the arbitrage bot here is going to trade its Pulsechain for DAI stablecoin within. So it's going to trade its Pulsechain for Atropa and then Atropa into DAI stablecoin, because here it's going to be cheaper. So there's going to be a very slight price difference, and then it's going to swap that DAI stablecoin into the pool with Pulsechain. So then what's happening here in this process is it's basically getting just a little bit more Pulsechain, because Pulsechain is cheaper to DAI stablecoin in the pool on the right-hand side, and in the pool on the left-hand side, the arbitrage occurs between the Pulsechain and the Atropa to the DAI, and then the DAI to the Pulsechain in the opposite pool. So if that doesn't make sense, it's probably going to be something that you're going to need to look at in the Block Explorer. So once you actually start to do it for yourself and really look at it in the Block Explorer, it's going to start to make a lot more sense. And what actually happens is it's like a self-balancing mechanism. So then the pools actually get self-balanced, prices get self-balanced. So there's a disparity first when Pulsechain is sold down into DAI Stablecoin, but then the arbitrage bots balances out by buying the Atropa, selling it into DAI, and then selling the DAI into the Pulsechain. So then what it's doing is it's raising that price of the Pulsechain with the DAI stablecoin back up. And then what it's doing is it's leaving value behind and creating a balancing mechanism. So now this is a very linear way of looking at it. Now, what does this actually mean when it comes to an ecosystem? So what makes the Atropa ecosystem unique is the 414 dev has made hundreds of tokens within as parts. So the individual tokens within a larger whole, the Atropa ecosystem. So if we take a look, for example, so let's take a look, for example, at just how many tokens Maria has created. So now I'm going to share this very quickly. So this is Atropa ecosystem V2. So this is all thanks to Sunny's Pub. And this is just to name a few. Well, not just to name a few. I believe that this is all of them. So you have Atropa down, TSFI, whatever this is. So here's the token name and ticker symbol. And if we start to scroll down, so this is within the Atropa ecosystem. So already, look how many we've got here. We're into the hundreds now. Now, obviously, I don't know what's going on here. Maria's probably experimenting with different kinds of tokens and liquidity setups, different kinds of logic. Always ready, always there. Sure, no worries. Keeps going. Pebble Heart recipient. Ayo. Murder, bail, royalty, Hexaco. So again, we won't say that one there. All the way down to here. So 260. So G-Baby is the brand new one. So G-Baby was deployed. When was G-Baby deployed? G-Baby was deployed just a couple of days ago. So today it's the 12th of November, and this was deployed on the 9th of November. So this is just a few days old. And wow, if you are in prostitution or BFF and you're not looking at G-Baby, I would strongly recommend looking at G-Baby. This is, again, something that I've really only started to wrap my head around just very, very recently. So G-Baby is a brand new one. So I keep track of all the brand new ones because I've got, in the Telegram group, I've got the notifications for new Atropa contract launches. So now let's go back into that presentation. So as you can see, that's an ecosystem. So this is just a small sample size of the ecosystem. And I haven't actually it's not 100% accurate here. This is really just a visual depiction of showing what's actually happening. So for example, we've got Atropa DAI stablecoin, which it wasn't created by 414, but the fork. So this is how it all started with Atropa and DAI stablecoin. So how Atropa started, I'll recommend checking out this video if you want to see the process that Maria actually followed to get this process underway. And then within all these different tokens, they're all interrelated within a web. So this is what I'm going to start to show now. So, and again, they might not be like, there might not, I'm pretty sure there's a legal DAI pool. There is a legal Atropa pool. There might not be a U and Atropa. There might not be a U and down. So this is just graphically representing the web. But if you do go through that process of looking at it all yourself, you will see the different relationships. And this is something that I'm going to start to do over time. So what actually happens here? So in this particular, what happens basically is real value flows into the system via the liquidity pools, which are connected to Pulsechain. So this is the number one way that liquidity flows into the ecosystem. And then what actually happens there is the prices go up as they're being purchased with Pulsechain. So DAI goes up, Atropa goes up. Now, in that setup that I showed before, this is just a very linear way of looking at it. But what actually happens when it occurs within a web? When the price rises in some pools, there is a deal within other pools for arbitrage bots. So just like I showed you the arbitrage, but now it's happening across an entire ecosystem of tokens, which all revolves around the wrapped pool, the wrapped Pulsechain pool. So this is the real value. And so as those prices are going up, in those pools, they're going down against other pools. Now, within that web, the arbitrage bot is going to say, right, I'm going to take this deal. So it's rebalancing the prices of the pools with buyers and sells. And in the process, it's leaving behind value within the pools. And I'll show how it actually does that. And then as this process is happening, because it's a web, because it's all interconnected, it's like this wave that flows through the different liquidity pools. So because it's all interconnected, this triggers even more rebalancing, sending a wave of arbitrage throughout the ecosystem. And as it's doing that, it's leaving value along the way. So now, if you think about this in the context of DAI Stablecoin, if DAI Stablecoin is interconnected with all of these different liquidity pools, people are just thinking that, oh, I'm putting my Pulsechain into DAI Stablecoin and I'm looking at the market cap versus the liquidity. And let's just say if I looked at that on Deck Screen, I'm pretty sure the liquidity was about 1.7 million and the market cap was 163 million. And then people are then looking at, okay, well, we've got the token supply of 22 billion. Well, there's not going to be enough liquidity. But the liquidity also exists within all these different interconnected pools. If you're just looking at the liquidity within the Pulsechain and the DAI stablecoin, then yes, the liquidity is very thin. But it also has liquidity that's quote unquote borrowed from all the interconnected pools that it's connected with. And DAI stablecoin is connected with literally hundreds of liquidity pools. And I'll show you that process actually as well. And I will show you that in the future and how you can actually start to study these liquidity pools. There's an amazing, amazing website created from someone in Sunny's Pub called Martin. So shout out to you, Martin. So now, again, as this is happening, it's leaving real value behind. So if we're thinking about it in a linear way, this real value that's getting left behind is not really happening within a linear system where it just goes up and down against one particular token. But when it's going up and down against hundreds of different tokens and the arbitrage is occurring between hundreds of different tokens, the arbitrage bots are leaving all this value behind. So there's no real buyers coming in, but the arbitrage is leaving all this actual liquidity behind in all these pools. So the way that I'm looking at this is it's more of a sustainable long-term process. And this is exactly what I would want for DAI stablecoin. I don't know if it's going to be this process where Richard is just going to put all his liquidity in there and it's going to peg it to $1 by tomorrow. I don't actually see that being the case. I think it's going to be something a little bit more sustainable and long-term like this. And this is actually something that I would prefer because it seems more sustainable, and sustainability, something that is more sustainable, is going to last longer. It's going to have less negative externalities. So how does this actually look like on the Block Explorer? So I've taken Coexistence Steven. So this, you can actually check out my Lao video. So this is something I can really see a lot of people aren't paying attention to it because I can see my videos, the number of people who are watching the videos really drop. And basically what we're doing is we're converting, well, one of the things that we're doing is we're converting fake value into real value as it's being put into liquidity pools and then being arbitraged by bots. So Coexistence Steven, for example, has over 100 liquidity pools. And because this is a freedom of speech blockchain, the LAU tokens are the clearest sign that this blockchain really represents speech. So I've personally encoded poems into one of my tokens, not one of my LAU tokens, but I've encoded a poem into it. So it literally has speech on the blockchain, just like Bitcoin did. And in this token, I'm showing the world that this token is going to contribute to world peace. So for example, there's people who have tokens where they want to use funds from these tokens to I know Sunny wants to plant trees in the ground. No humans, not going to give it to any humans, just plant trees in the ground. There's another guy who is creating basically his LAU token for taking value and putting it into displaced people in Syria. And I'm doing this so I can take value out and put it into meditation centers, which I believe are going to contribute to world peace. So this is freedom of speech. That's what this blockchain is all about. So what does this actually look like on the Explorer? So this is me here doing a little sell with a valueless token. So I've sold 0.1 of Coexistence Steven token. And then what happens? The arbitrage comes along and then it's removing and rebalancing those pools. And if you look here, what it's actually doing is it's 0.9, 0.08, 0.02, 0.01. Well, this is a double up. So the Block Explorer is not that good. But in any case, I've moved 0.1 and the arbitrage bots have moved more. They've moved basically more than 0.2. So they've doubled the amount of movements in this particular move. So also the total liquidity within this LAU token is slowly coming up, which is also another beautiful thing. So I'm going to keep trying to explain this LAU thing. But for now, Coexistence Steven, this is a scam. Be very careful of this scam. That's all I'm going to tell you. All right. Now, let's have a look at this. So in this Explorer, I've gone into the very first one here, this transaction. So 4CC. So now in the 4CC, what's actually happening here? So what actually happened here is the Arbitrage bot spent 21,825 Pulse and sold for 22,437 Pulse. So what did he do? So this is the process of arbitrage shown on the Block Explorer. So first of all, he exchanged his Pulsechain for BFF. And then he changed BFF for GBaby. And then he changed GBaby for Coexistent Steven. And then he changed Coexistent Steven back into BFF and then BFF back into Pulsechain. And in that process, made a profit. So the profit was 612 Pulsechain minus whatever the gas fees were within this process. And that's arbitrage. And the arbitrage bots don't need to make much money. As long as they're making even cents, that's all they need because it's just happening continuously. And so each block, the arbitrage is looking at what's happening in the previous block and it's taking advantage of it. And anywhere that there's a gap, it's taking it. And then this is what is actually happening with the wave that's happening with the arbitrage bots. Now, why should we care? Really, all I really care about is just I want my bags to pump. That's all I really care about, right? That's what most people care about. Me, of course, I care about that. But what I also care about is creating a better world. And can we, with Pulsechain, actually have a better blockchain than the rest of the world? We talk about true DeFi, but do we actually have a better decentralized financial ecosystem that's developing on here? I think that we are miles and miles and miles and miles and miles ahead of the rest of the market. We are so far ahead. I think we are going to be the go-to chain. This is where my conviction comes from when I talk about Pulsechain being one of the #1 blockchains in the world, because I actually see what's happening and you can't deny the math. That's the thing, the math that's actually happening. And as I'm learning more about the math, you can't deny that logic. This is the beautiful thing about it. Now, a lot of people in Pulsechain are obviously Hexicans. So what I want to do is I want to use the example of Hex and show how this process actually alleviates the major issue that occurred with Hex. So currently, this is how people are thinking about DAI Stablecoin. They're thinking about it with the old model of liquidity. It's one-dimensional. It goes in one way. It comes out the other way. I'm going to buy it with Pulsechain, and then I'm going to take it back out and put it back into Pulsechain. This is the old way of looking at it. So, for example, here with Hex, let's just take 3 liquidity pools that would have occurred with Hex on the Ethereum blockchain. So the way that I really started to wrap my journey with Hex really started to develop here, because what I was doing at the time was I was trying to grow my Ethereum bag. Hex, I had a little bit of money in. Richard Hart was all right, but I was just like, whatever, what is this Hex? But I was seeing movement. Movement is great. So when there's movement, I can trade. So I was trading my Ethereum for Hex, and then I would trade my Hex back into Ethereum. So when Hex rised, I would trade, when Ethereum went up, I would trade that for Hex. And then when Hex went up, I would trade that back into the Ethereum. So I slowly grew my Ethereum bag to like dozens of Ethereum. But then all of a sudden, Hex just kept going and it had a massive run. So the price of Hex continued to go up against the price of Ethereum and USDC. So the value of Hex against Ethereum and USDC, and I've only just used USDC as an example. There are and were other stablecoin liquidity pools that it was connected to. But what actually happens here is as that liquidity is moving from Ethereum and USDC to Hex, it's creating this exaggerated price difference where there's a massive price disparity until eventually Hex is at all-time highs, even though Ethereum is going bonkers because of the liquidity setup and the percentages and how things are working with the thin liquidity. Hex's price to Ethereum was still way askew compared to Ethereum, even though Ethereum was also going on a run. It was in this gigantic bull run. So we had this gigantic liquidity bubble, and basically it becomes a competition of who's going to rug it first. This is the old model of liquidity. So what happens? The dump starts happening. So Hex starts flowing. Hex starts dumping. The liquidity from Hex starts going back into Ethereum, back into USDC. And what ends up happening in these scenarios is you've got basically 5% winners, 95% losers. So people are dumping their Hex back into Ethereum and back into stable coins until eventually we are where we are now, where people have converted their liquidity into other assets. So this is just extraction. So they've taken all the value out of Hex gone into Ethereum and stablecoins, taken it off the blockchain and bought Lamborghinis and mansions. And this is what people do with cryptocurrency. So again, even this concept is also an old concept. This is also something where I'm really starting to rethink this idea of, hang on a minute, this is something where Somi's made some great points, and I love all of his points, but I'm starting to think, hang on a minute, again, with this old model of liquidity and this old model of PvP cryptocurrency, people are really trying to extract so they can set themselves up. But what if with this new ecosystem, the incentive is to stay on the chain and plug into the chain and earn yield within the chain? This is something that Somi highlighted, and this is something that I'm seeing occurring with the liquidity pools that I'm creating. The yield that I'm getting from these liquidity pools is incentivizing me to stay on the chain. So now, what actually happens if we take Hex and this system, this old system, this one-dimensional system where it's up one way and then down another way, and that's it, it's GG, game over, everybody cries, and then only some people are winning. What if we actually take that and plug it in to the Atropa ecosystem, plug it into this liquidity web? So many of the liquidity flaws of Hex can be alleviated due to the web technology of the Atropa ecosystem. So now, once we start connecting it with all these different liquidity pools, which is what's happened, now it's that process of waves that are leaving behind value is now going to start happening with Hex. So this is a whole nother area within the Atropa ecosystem that I will continue to cover. I have made videos on it previously, but now I'm really trying to depict this in very clear and logical ways that people can understand. By the way, everyone's focus is on p-hex, but do not fade e-hex, because no matter what, even with p-hex, because we have Ethereum Hex connected to this liquidity web, the arbitrage is still occurring between all these different liquidity pools with e-hex and p-hex. And then you're going to have arbitrage creating value also between Hex and with p-hex and e-hex. So no matter which way you look at it, yes, the market is going to trade, but it's going to create disparity within the pools where the arbitrage is just going to take advantage of it, and slowly, everything is going to rise together. So this is the beauty of what's happening on Pulsechain. This is not happening anywhere else that I can personally see. Only some of the lads like Hotonomics are starting to put this logic into Solana, but it's basically an uphill battle, I would imagine, putting it into those ecosystems, because what makes it so powerful here is the arbitrage bots can actually profit because Pulsechain is so cheap. If you do it on other blockchains, it's impossible to do this on Ethereum because the arbitrage bot needs to make its profit. But by the time it spends its gas, it's not making any profit. So the price disparity that needs to happen within the liquidity pools is going to have to be so big. This is the number one issue because of the gas. And so that's why I'm personally a massive advocate of Pulsechain staying low. And I think now, the more that I think about it, it's like I want the value of Pulsechain to stay low. I think it's the most bullish thing for this chain possible. But everybody is just thinking in the old way, which is the Hex way, which is I want all the liquidity to go into Pulsechain so that I can extract it out and take it out. And you know what? I think it's going to happen within this particular bull market. Hex is going to go bonkers. Pulsechain is going to go bonkers. But I tell you what, I think this is going to be the game come the next bull market. It's going to be who's going to have the thickest liquidity pools, because the game with Pulsechain is all about liquidity. How many tokens can I accumulate and how much value can I maintain on the blockchain? That for me is the real alpha on Pulsechain. Now we're still in this transitionary phase of the old liquidity way of thinking, the one-dimensional way, to this new way of ecosystems and DeFi 2.0. And once people start to convert and realize, wait, this is a much better way of doing things, and it ends up benefiting everyone at the same time, which is what I'm all about, because I don't like this PvP system. I want us all to win, and we can. And this is the thing. Anyone can come along and plug their tokens into this ecosystem through the LAU contracts, for example. So again, if you haven't checked that out, I would strongly recommend checking that out. So other features that occur within the Atropa ecosystem, so the logic of the Atropa ecosystem features is how it capitalizes on Hart's law. So the assets bonded by liquidity move together. So whether they move together inversely, so whether they move up against each other or down against each other or sideways against each other, depends on the liquidity setup and the percentages of how the liquidity is set up between them. This is something that, again, I'm only just starting to learn and starting to study. When I look, for example, at Bullion within the Atropa ecosystem, if you look at the liquidity setup of Bullion, it has like this massive token supply, and 99 or 98 point something percent of the supply, or even if you look at GBaby, Maria holds 98.7% of the supply, and only basically between 1% and 2% is in liquidity. And so when you start to look at how this can actually happen, and how the value flows, and how this interacts with other different tokens within the web, it really creates this really unique dynamic. So obviously everybody knows by now, if you're studying DAI Stablecoin, that it's moving up in unison with Atropa, and that's because of the percentages of each token that are bonded together. This is the real magic of the Hart's law in this particular instance. They literally are moving basically identically because of the way that the liquidity setup is. Now, you also have the different waves. So what does this mean? So this is the different liquidity setups based on different percentages that I was just talking about, which creates different charts. And so these different types of charts in turn create different kinds of arbitrage opportunities between them based on the web. So as they're all interconnected with different charts moving in different ways, I've looked at the Atropa ecosystem and I've seen things literally going sideways against each other. They're like stable against each other. But then you're looking at this token against another token and it's going up like this. You look at it against another token and it's going down. This was one of the things which really blew my mind about Atropa all those years, or last year when I really started to look into it. The other thing is the burnt liquidity. This is something that people really aren't, it's almost the part that people are really forgetting about a lot. They keep looking at DAI Stablecoin as needing $22 billion. There's 22 billion tokens in circulation, so it's going to need $22 billion of value. Otherwise, it's all just going to get taken out. But there's burnt liquidity. So the burnt liquidity creates fault bottom floors as sell pressure is converted into buyer pressure. So I've created a video on this. I would strongly recommend checking that out. But what this actually means is, so these 3 extra features I want to make more videos on and explain in more depth. So I've done videos where I've kind of just been working it out on the fly. Now I really want to show it in more detail with these little examples, because pDAI, DAI Stablecoin, if we continue doing what we're doing, I cannot see how it can't get to the dollar mark. I don't know how it's going to peg. We're seeing whispers of that. We're seeing 99 Capital, Decentralize Me, present all that evidence about how it's going to actually peg to the dollar. I don't know exactly how it's going to peg. Could it be the P maker? Could it be, could Maria be the one that's actually, when Richard Hart got that phone call, someone who knows how to create a P maker alternative? Could this be it? Could the Atropa ecosystem in Dysnomia be that P maker alternative? So could it be a combination of P maker? Could it be a combination of the Atropa ecosystem, which is the P maker replacement? Could it also be a combination of this stable swap? So I've done those stable swap videos. Once you start connecting all those, I mean, you look at PUSDC and pDAI rather, they're moving in unison. So imagine that when they get to $1, they all get bonded in liquidity with some sort of P stable swap mechanism. There's all these different ways that the tokens will stay in unison and stay stabilized. It won't just be one way, which is always, if it's just one way, it means there can potentially be a point of failure. But if you've got this one way, which is supported by this way and also supported by this way, it really strengthens and unites the stability of that coin, which is again why it's like, man, DAI Stablecoin, I'm just seeing all the signs. I can't help but be bullish. I've tried to maintain neutrality throughout the whole journey of this channel, but I'm seeing, when I see Decentralize Me's videos, when I'm doing research, when I'm finding the evidence, it's like, how can I possibly not be bullish? I want to really protect the audience. I don't want to say go buy this and that, but it's very difficult not to be extremely bullish. So once again, take care, everybody.